All right. Okay, so the point on the agenda today for the Foundations Design Sync is to, hey Julia, is to start discussing an implementation plan for templates. For context, Sasha is working on a visual direction for templates, but we also need to figure out what we're actually delivering or building and sort of what that looks like. The idea is that we'll have a visual direction mostly finalized in this milestone, and we want to start moving on the implementation in whatever form that looks like, starting in the next milestone. That is all that I've got for context. So at this point, I am going to hand things over to Sasha to kind of walk us through where we are today to kind of lead this discussion here.
Yes, let me share my Figma. All right. So we we did some refinements in the last couple of days. I also paired up with Jeremy on some open questions. We got some more feedback from design DRIs, from our engineering team and other designers. Um, so basically, when it comes to like the templates themselves, I think these are pretty boring to be implemented, especially like the index template. I think this will just be like a component, however we want to call this, like a template, which has like different areas or like different regions, which supposedly would be slots, I guess. And then it has just defined spacing and like the responsive behavior for it. So I think like the first iteration of the index template might be pretty straightforward. Um, Maybe not so much like the panel component, which we can come to in a bit. Um, and then for the detailed template, it's not that vastly different from the index template. The only addition here is that we have like a sidebar. So this template has like some functionality built in, but the only functionality being that you can toggle the sidebar. So you can show and hide the sidebar. Um, but essentially, in terms of like regions, I think they're more or less the same. Um, so yeah, like these would be like the classic two templates we're gonna to build. But then in addition to that, we'll have to build like a bunch of components, like engineering also already pointed out, like like we talked about the panel component, potentially a panel header component. Maybe we have to splice it up even further for um, like what's in the panel header. So like the location identifier. Naming is hard. We can name this whatever. Um, you native speakers might have like better naming than I do for certain things. But you get the idea, right? Like this is like a simplified breadcrumb. The breadcrumb, which is currently located in the static panel, will move onto the application frame. So we just move it on the top, just to make room for like like all those things which will live a happy life in the new panel header, which is like the page title and then some actions. And I think, yeah, these will be potentially more of the discussions we can dive into afterwards. Like, how do we build like the components we need for these things? Um, but I don't want to get too far ahead. Like, are there any specific concerns or questions about like the two templates? Maybe we start with the index template because that, at least to me, seems to be pretty straightforward. Any additional context you might need, let me know. Nothing.
I think some context for me, I know what's in my mind is sort of what we would own as the design system team, knowing that we own the application Chrome now versus what are the things that need sort of the collaboration input from the teams that own the respective areas. Like we don't own the full index page. That's another team. So that's more, I think,
Um,
context for people talking about things.
yes, just we would just own the template, right? We wouldn't own like what's actually being like what the template is being used for, right? Like the content and stuff. Is that assumption correct?
Yeah, like we don't own the content, but I'm thinking about, like if we're releasing an HTML and CSS template and it's just living out there for other teams to use, I guess
Yeah.
we're not really accomplishing the underlying goal of templating, of using templates in the product, right? So it's more
Yeah,
thinking about
like
like what are we directly responsible for implementing versus what are things that we would need to partner with teams on.
yeah, I think this will be part of like the engineering implementation plan, but we already discussed that like the eventually like the happy path for this would be just something off the shelf you can take to build like a new page. Might be the only edge case we currently could support, because like how pages are built today, it will be more of like specific features we have to migrate towards like components. So we need to componentize at least like part of this, right? So it needs to be like separate components which could be used separately to make this feasible to implement and to have like a migration strategy and path. Um, so thinking of like the page actions, or like the panel header, for example, so that we don't just build like a panel component, but maybe like a panel header component, and the panel component itself might be something which is eventually only be used in like certain areas in the product because of some of the restrictions of like how pages are built today, right? I guess like that's something we have to figure out, what's really needed, and like how do we have to divide this up into like smaller pieces. But there was already like a discussion around that in Figma and in other
Okay,
places. Yeah.
got it. Thanks for the context.
I put a note here in the notes as well. This is like a little bit of a, I don't know, a tangent or a sideline to this, but what are the considerations for like banners or alerts in these templates? Or are there any? This is related to a new worksheet I'm on, so I have banner management on the brain.
Um, what did it trigger? Yeah, that's a good one. Like Michael Lee already asked the same question. I think that's something we can bake into like the templates like officially to make that like another region for like how alerts would be displayed.
Hmm.
Um, that's something I originally didn't envision that we need to have like a fixed place for it, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So this is something on my to-do list for today or tomorrow to actually implement into like like a more refined version of like the templates.
Cool. Yeah, I think that the benefit of it is that if we can include some consideration for it in the templates, then at least that gives everybody else something to react against when they say, well, wait a minute, I need one over here or over there. And then that can kind of be the basis for a conversation about why those may be living in other places and why maybe they don't need to.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Do you see like this plus here, or is that
I
only on
do.
my screen?
I do
I
see the
have
plus. I
I
don't know
have
where
no
that
clue
came from.
how I got
Oh,
this
I
here, and
think
I can.
someone might have accidentally drawn that on your screen.
Okay, I was worried, but it's not part of Figma, so I was like, okay. Anyway, any more questions?
It's not a
Ask.
question as such. Sorry, did someone else just start speaking?
I did, yeah.
Okay. I'll make this quick. It's not a question. My feeling with this is there's so much complexity around how pages are built in GitLab at the moment. It's hard to make any decisions from an engineering perspective until we actually just try and do this on a page, or maybe 2 pages, 3 pages. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of sort of, oh, okay, we can't do it the way we thought because of X, Y, and Z. So I think that's where most of my feedback would come from, is a spike, if I were to pick this up. I think I had a brief chat with Scott earlier today, and I think he's of the same opinion. So, start really small and just build it up.
Yeah, I think I would agree also. And I think that there's like where the nature of, I think we have to, like, the first thing is to build out like individual components is more important than having this as one piece you can just, like, use as a drop-in replacement, because that might be the happy path for like building new pages, but for the majority of pages out there, this is not really like a feasible way to be implemented, right? Just in like how these pages are built with like a single entry with like Haml Ruby, and then maybe multiple view entry points on top of that, spread out into like multiple components and templates anyway, like technical templates, not these templates. But so yeah, I would agree that we have to start with something, and then like start ramping up like potential components. Like, I'm not sure if we can repurpose that or make use of it, but in PaperCuts we did quite some effort to migrate like page headings into a single shared component. Well, 2 components, one for Haml and one for Vue. So I'm not sure like how this will play out with what we're trying to achieve here, but at least there were some migrations upfront to unify some of the structures, which will be helpful, hopefully, for this effort as well.
Following on from that, Sasha, are designing and building out, for example, the panel header you showed on the index template, that blue box, building out some way of implementing that consistently? Is that in scope for this initiative, or is this initiative just about providing the slots or the holes and the spacing between those holes and how they move around?
You mean like potential like how filtering would be used in such a panel header, for example, or like if a heading is being used or not? Are you referring to more like displaying the content within like a region?
More just this is a H1 and these are the H1 styles. This is where for the until we have actions up in the panel header, this is where the action might be. This is where a description is and how it looks. There's almost like a just drop in something you drop into that slot, which has all of the styling and options for the majority of cases ready to go.
I would say yeah, partly like headings were like considered, right? Like there might be like a slot for metadata, for example. At least on like we were thinking about that for the detailed page. But then again, because like I think the nature how these pages are built, I'm not sure if it actually can be part of like like a single component to be used in the product, or if this would be multiple components we build out, and then we have to stitch it together, at least for now in the product, until we reach a state where we could, have a more of a one do it all drop-in replacement. But yeah, it's certainly something we consider, and also like if you think about like the panel component, like all these things which live like inside of like the panel header, like with like the page title, the actions, and so on. So there will be like available slots to slot into things, and I think Mark already was saying that potentially we have to like portal like some features into like another template. So there is some things we have to take into consideration, like how far can we go with these things. So yeah, there needs to be some more thoughtful thinking from an engineering point of view, I guess, to see if it's feasible to do that in the first round, or if this has to wait, right? But to circle back to your question, then, like for example, like if you think about the index page, and for example, if you have like filtering options like search and other filters available, if that would be like a pattern we want to support, then this would be certainly not in the scope of this, but could be like a follow-up that we create like a component which has like these built in. So you could just use that as a replacement to any hard-coded filtering being used on an index page. But I think that's just going too far for at least this state. Does that make sense? Chad, do you want to vocalize your read only?
Sure. I was just saying that, but I think this maybe speaks to Mark's suggestion that we try something and kind of see what makes sense in terms of like, this blue box in your design, is that actually a component, and does the component just accept data, or does it just provide spacing and there's just slots where you plug in all of these pieces themselves? I think that we're going to learn the right way to approach this by trying it in real world scenarios.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's like why I kept this part a bit vague, because there might be a lot of restrictions what we actually can deliver, because like some pages are widely different in terms of like how they're built. So yeah, I think we have to look into this first, and then we can come up with a plan.
So in terms of the plan, I feel like one of an important first step along these lines is to identify. We could do it in a few ways. We could either say, okay, what's the dumbest, simplest page that we can apply this to, and then we can work on that. Or we could say, what's a page that is kind of representative of a lot of pages? It's a common type of page, the way it's been built. We could look at that. Or we could say there's pages A, B, and C. They're all a bit different. What do they share in common? So I would say we should choose one of those approaches and then start working on it, breaking it down, either with the very simplest MVC kind of thing, or what's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of biggest impact, or finally, what's the sort of longer term, most broadly applicable things we can do. I'm leaning towards the first two rather than the latter, because the latter just scope increases so easily. Like, we've already talked about alerts and filtering and so on. I think that's getting ahead of ourselves. I think you can iterate on that.
I think if you talk about that today, it would just be providing like a slot to. So it's not that we would integrate like alerts into the template. It's just like that we have like a defined space where alerts should go into. right? It's more about like the defined space and not like that we build like these functionalities into the template, if that makes sense. I think the only built-in functionality, as I mentioned before, would be like the steering the display of like the sidebar on the detail template, right? So you can show and hide the template. And then, but this will be like a different component, will be like the panel header has a lot of functionalities, right? That's where like potentially like the functionality lies. But the rest would just be having like an empty thing which defines space and different slots, and then we try to map that in the product to to slot like or like include like different templates in different slots we have. That would be like something we can try out pretty quickly, right? If that works. Would you agree, Mark?
You said a lot of things, so
I know.
I'm not sure what I'd say be agreeing to if I said yes. You didn't say anything I disagree with. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. But like if like the template would just be considered of being like a dumb thing with slots and space, like defined spacing, responsive behavior, I think that would be easy to be built out and try out if we can migrate like pages to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's, so dumb that it's kind of trivial to iterate on. Like you can't go wrong, I think, with that approach. Yeah. And I'm thinking an English view component that's a Rails view component is probably the best first choice. Most
I would agree.
probably going to benefit from that.
Yeah, I think the oh Jesus Christ, Dan, what did you do? The French view component might just have like a very limited use case. Might only be work items and potentially wiki as of now. So yeah, I would agree.
You?
Yeah, most of it.
Oh wow,
most of it nowadays. But yeah, work item might be the leading part of the application, which has the most view components, right? Like the most migrations. So might be the one to look into.
Yeah, work item is certainly, I think, the most modern part of the Vue Vue tech stack right now, but also very complicated.
Yeah, true.
Actually, no, that's not true. Sorry. I think that all of the Duo stuff is probably the most modern part of the Vue tech stack, but not really
that's fair.
exploration.
Yeah, that's fair. But that has been built from the ground up just in Vue. So that might be like an unfair comparison. And most of it lives in a different repository right now. So.
And it'll also diverge from our usual tech stack shortly. So
let's do our next.
Ignore that for now.
Yes.
I think. I say shortly, who knows, but we'll. So, Sasha, is there anything you need from me imminently on this, or Scott?
I don't think so. I think I will set up like another sync call with you that we can, deep dive more into details, like implementation details, or like how the template versus the panel component, or like components, if we have to build like multiples, and what's the most feasible thing to build. I think we can, take that on another sync call, not to bore everyone on the call, but that would be, I guess, the next step for me, if that makes sense for you as well.
Sure. Yeah, it might be difficult to get a call with me and Scott, but
We'll figure it out.
yeah, cool.
All right, that sounds like that is the end of the implementation discussion here. We don't have anything else on the agenda, so I think we can call it early for today. Say thanks everyone for joining in. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I'll be excited to move on beyond the design exploration and finalization for this. I think it'll be an exciting change for the product. Is there anything else that you want to discuss here before we end the meeting for today? All right, I will add the recording and upload this to GitLab Unfiltered, and we'll share it out with the rest of the org so they can hear about what we are working on around templates. Thanks a lot, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers.